Hey everyone, I am Elysa Leonard and I am with a charitable organization, a 501c3 called Aquarium Divers For Coral. And I am here today with one of our partner charitable organizations, I.CARE, which stands for Islamorada Conservation and Restoration Education. But we fondly we use the acronym I.CARE. And I'm here with Dr. Kylie Smith and Mike Goldberg, who are co-founders of I.CARE. And Mike is also the owner of Key Dives, which is a very helpful business for the I.CARE team. And I just wanted our divers to get to know you a little better and really a bit more about what I.CARE does and how Aquarium Divers For Coral partners with I.CARE. I'm going to start with you, Mike. You have a windy road of a career, and I think that most people, actually the best people, have that kind of a windy road. I know I'm guilty of it too, but you started in finance, I think in New York City, and then ended up in coral restoration. And I know that's a really small little summary. I thought maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Wow, well, we're trying to encapsulate the last 40 years of my career in a few sentences. Yes, I did start in finance between Chicago and Los Angeles, actually. And I got tired of that world after about 12 years. And while I was living in Los Angeles, became a dive instructor. And then moved to the Eastern Caribbean, fell in love with diving many years prior, and thought I would give it a go, trying to make a living in the world of scuba diving along with my wife. And after many years running a business and now owning a dive business, watching the coral reefs decline, I decided that I wanted to do something. I wasn't sure how, and if it wasn't for Dr. Smith, none of this would have ever happened. She'd come into the store, she'd talk to me, ask me questions. I mean, I would ask her questions, and she would give me all these answers, and it was a great way for me to learn the science of coral, the science behind restoration, and then putting those together with the recreational scuba dive business, trying to make an organization that supported reef restoration using recreational divers. But it was a long road. Like I said, almost 40 years from when I started in finance to the beginnings of what I.CARE is today.
Great. And Kylie, as a coral reef ecologist, what drew you to Mike? Why did you, decide to partner with him? And I think that flows right into a joint question I had for you is, the rumor has it that you started this business or this charity over at a meeting over a beer at the Reef Futures Conference. What was that spark and how did that happen? You guys can both take those questions.
Yeah, so I guess what really drew me to Mike was his passion. You will not meet a more passionate individual about anything.
I agree.
But he and the Key Dives crew really created this amazing community through their efforts with cleanup dives. And we found this amazing community of divers that just want to give back. And I think once you dive with a purpose, it's really hard to not dive with a purpose. You may not be on a cleanup dive, but you're still down there cleaning things up. And so it was really Mike's idea that formed the way that I.CARE functions in terms of using recreational dive shops and the recreational dive community. And yes, that rumor's true. So I came down in 2018. I was still a graduate student at Clemson University, and I had come down for the Reef Futures Conference. And after the conference, I was doing a field season, and I asked Mike and a couple of the guys from the shop if they wanted to meet up for a beer at the Florida Keys Brewing Company. And it was over a picnic table in the back that the idea of I.CARE was born. And it was about a year and a half working with our permitting agencies and going back and forth to create this idea and get permission to do this, because nobody had really been, we'll call it brave enough to tackle using the recreational dive community. And I think there was a lot of questions, uncertainty, concerns coming from the permitting agencies. And so they were very careful about, you know, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And it's really the baseline for how we run our program, why we have the supervisions that we do, why we have the trainings that we do. It's all just to make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're going to do that day.
Wonderful. And we got to experience that just last week, doing the training and then getting out on the reef and doing some outplanning. So it's a fantastic program. It really works. And Aquarium Divers for Coral, we're kind of those citizen scientists, those divers that want to dive with a purpose. And I think you're 100% on that, because once you do diving with a purpose, you really don't want to do it any other way. It just is something that becomes driven in you. So I agree with that for sure. Kylie, what kind of, what's the core mission, if you could put it in a, a short statement of I.CARE, and how do you see it having evolved from, working in 2021 on Alligator Reef to now? How many, if you know off the top, I don't know, how many corals have you transplanted and divers educated, that sort of stuff? That would be great. Tell us.
Absolutely. I guess the overarching goal is to help rebuild our coral reefs using divers, giving divers a way to be involved and having them be the army, putting the science in their hands and getting them out there to put the corals down and to help us take care of it. I think the scientists have figured out how to do it, so now it's our turn to turn it over to an army of people who care so much about it to have them do the work. And I think that mission has stayed at the core of what we do, but we have grown so much in the past 4 years, it blows my mind. I never thought we would have our own coral propagation program at this point, and we do. We have a land-based program, which I think, peeking ahead to one of your earlier questions, I'll come back to, or I guess one of your later questions I'll come back to. But to date, we have transplanted just over 23,000 corals, and we've had just over 4,300 people come through the program.
That is incredible. Those numbers are amazing. Mike, you've said a phrase, knowing is the key to caring. And I agree with that. And I saw a presentation by Michel Cousteau who said something very similar. He was talking about aquariums and he said, we have to show this to people, because how can they care about something if they don't know it exists? So I just wanted you to elaborate on that phrase, knowing is the key to caring.
Well, I mean, the core, in addition to what Kylie was talking about, the core of what we do is science. There's no shortage for the science that we deploy with, silence my phone. I'm going to do that earlier. Start that again. Anyway, so the core is the science. And with that, our divers know that we spare nothing when it comes to making sure what we're doing is the best method. So knowing is caring, knowing that what we are doing is the best at every turn, the best science that we have available and the best knowledge that we have available, translates into someone like the folks that are your members, knowing that what we're doing actually is working and producing caring individuals is the net result. So I think that the way we do it is and the intensity at which at levels we take it to are producing those divers that understand and want to be a part, but most importantly recognize what we're doing is working and will continue to work. So.
Great. And Kylie, you've studied the impacts of bleaching events, hurricanes, diseases on coral. How does I.CARE use science to ensure that the corals you transplant, like the ones on Alligator Victory and the ones where we outplanted corals last week, Rocky Top reefs, thrive? what methods are you putting into place to help that happen?
So most of those methods, and this was kind of what I was referencing in the last question you asked me, it really comes with where we get our corals from. And we get them from a lot of different partners, and it seems like each partner is doing their own method behind trying to provide corals that have the highest chance of survival. So for example, one of our biggest partners is Moat Marine Laboratory. They were our first partner that gave us corals, and so they're still very, very important to us. We have a great relationship with them, where they are breeding corals that go through a series of experiments where they get put in raceways where they have increased water temperatures and lower pH levels to levels that they experience on the reef and what they anticipate they'll be experiencing over the next several decades. And then with those survivors, they're crossbreeding and creating new genets that will try to have those resistant, resilient characteristics from those other genotypes. So the amount of genetic diversity that they're creating is incredible. So that's kind of one strategy. We also have some great partnerships with the Florida Aquarium and the Reef Institute, and they have rescue corals. Those corals came from the reef here in Florida, and they were brought back to their facilities, and they're spawned there. And so we know that these colonies survived what was out naturally on the reef, but we don't know much about those, what are called sexual recruits, the babies that are coming from those spawning efforts. And so we get those corals, we put them out, we're monitoring them, looking at the performance in different environments, and providing that data back to those partners. We also get corals from Reef Renewal USA. That's organization is run by Ken Niedermeyer, and they have corals that stayed in their nursery through the heating event of 2023, and they survived. So again, we know that those genotypes, they're strong stock, and we can use those to go back into our shallow water environments. And then most recently, we have started providing corals for ourselves. And so that's a program that we go out and we collect what are called corals of opportunity. These are larger corals that have become detached from the reef structure, whether it's through storm damage or anchoring issues. And we rescue those corals, we bring them to land, and we fragment them and grow them out and take care of them in our land-based coral, our land-based coral nursery with the Keys Marine Lab, and then we get to put them into our outplanting stock. So even those corals, they're bouldering corals, they're larger corals. These guys are slow growers, so in order to get to a size that we're pulling in, they've survived the bleaching events of 2014, 15, and 2023, the cold snap of 2010, stony coral tissue loss disease that started outbreaking back in 2014, I think is when that started. Hurricanes, scouring, they've survived a lot, and so everything that we're doing has its own strategy of trying to hedge our bets that what we're putting out has the highest chance of surviving. And then we're monitoring those corals. We have a rigorous program where we're monitoring them up to 3 years so we can see who survives, but I think more importantly, who doesn't. And so that way we're able to identify which genetic strains and which species do we want to focus our efforts on or not focus our efforts on different sites.
Great, that's true.
Yeah, you remember last week you were able to, with your group, participate in a coral collection. You recall that? We picked up.
It was terrific. We were with Sammy, and we got a big coral. Absolutely, that was exciting, and it was a fun project to be a part of. It really was, because we were all tasked at looking for this coral, and where are we going to find one? And part of that, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, we could not find one. Maybe we won't find one on this, and then boom, there it was, and we were able to bring it back, and now it's at the Key Marine Lab, safe and ready to be put back out there. So. Yeah, that was really great. We really got to do a little bit of everything while we were down there with you guys. We did the Coral of Opportunity dive. We did a drift dive where we were getting the yellow-footed snails, and I remembered how to do that, so I was able to get 5. Other people were able to get more that were on your staff, but I claimed 5, so that was pretty good on a drift dive. And then we were able to get out there, even in the surgy, crazy waters, we were able to outplant some corals, and that was, it was just a little bit of everything, and really got to see start to finish, what the operation down at I.CARE is like. And just to move into our partnership together, Mike, Aquarium for Divers for Coral, how does a partnership with an organization like ours help I.CARE, help your restoration efforts? And if there was any stories that you remember specifically, with our divers, maybe last week or another time, and I can spark your memory because I've got a favorite. So.
Well, the partnership with FTC and I.CARE and also my dive shop, it's emblematic of what our goals are. When you think about what we're trying to accomplish and empowering recreational divers, taking folks that have a passion, in the sense that your folks are, working actively at aquariums or volunteer at aquariums. So they have a passion for the ocean, to turn that and translate that into a hands-on, effective way of helping heal the ocean. I mean, to me, that is what we're about, to take your members and turn them into what I affectionately call a coral geek. Get them out there and show them how we do it and why we do it. And I enjoyed personally interacting with each and every one of them. From the folks that we had this past week, there was a couple of local folks that are now members here in the Keys that are also part of your group, from the folks that are coming down from New Jersey and New York and Maryland. The relationship that I've been able to develop with you and your son is quite precious, and I look forward to getting you your rescue certification, as well as the relationship that I've been able to form with Mike. I mean, Mike will talk my ear off. He loves to talk. I love conversing with him. He has so many unique little ideas. He's always throwing this out or throwing that on. What about this? What about that? Trying to generate more interest for your group. The personal relationships, I would say, that have developed with you and Mike and actually, all of a sudden I'm forgetting. She lives up in Key Largo. I was Susie, thank you. Susie, I was reintroduced to Susie. That was fantastic. I mean, Susie and I, we used to dive off the same boat in San Pedro. I mean, I would never expect her to be living up the road from me. So, I mean, all of that is the reason why I do what I do, and why I love what I do.
Yeah. And it shows. It's great. It's such a passionate relationship. And yeah, I feel like we kind of can come in and be your army. So, the citizen scientist divers that can come and support your organization. And Mike, I remember a dive with you. It was probably one of the first ones we ever did, where you wanted to show us a really pretty reef, and alligator reef. It was just an area of reef that was just stunning. And you brought us there, and there were these little brain corals, and you would point to them and then go like this, and then point to another one and go like this. And I was like, he's asking me to remember these little brain corals. I don't know why. And so then we got back on the boat, and I said, what were you doing there? Why were you telling me to remember these brain corals? And you said, if you remember, you said, those are the badass babies. Those are the ones that show no bleaching. They're growing. They're not, they don't have disease. They're not bleaching. They're just growing. And you said to me, that's the hope. And I've never forgotten that story. It was really impactful. So I thank you for that. And then just, it just relates to that same question. Kylie, citizen scientists, I mean, that's kind of the model of I.CARE, but what can you say, about to this dive community, to aquarium divers and beyond? You rely on these people. So how, what's the motivation to get people involved?
It's probably the best way that I can say it has to do with some of the stories and I guess the testimonials. It is after a dive, I think the two most common things that I hear is people come up and they say, that was so much harder than I thought it was going to be. And then it's followed by, that was the best thing I've done underwater. That gives me a purpose to keep diving. And I really think that that mentality just shined so much with the community of divers after the summer of 2023. We had one of the worst bleaching events on record. We lost a lot of the corals that we had outplanted, and it was heartbreaking. And it was easy to lose your way. It was easy to lose hope. And what kept me going and our team of interns going was the community that showed up and rolled up their sleeves and said, let's do it again, because we have no choice but to rebuild it. And it's that mentality comes, and it fills your heart and soul, and it just keeps you going. And it's an incredible thing to be a part of and to watch people give back to this ecosystem that they fell in love with. You know, they got certified to dive and they keep going because they fell in love with it. And it's incredible to watch people be able to give back.
Yeah, I agree with
If
you.
I could tackle one thing, just the idea of having a purpose and or an experienced diver. Not, you know, new divers are great. We love showing them these things, but they haven't seen where we've come from to the point where we are today. And I get that feeling that Kylie's talking about from these experienced folks that, okay.
Question over. So Kylie, if you could talk to us a little bit about the partnership that you have with Mote Marine Laboratory and also donors like Dolores Barr Weaver, how do those things together, how did that really help your organization?
It's a really great question. So of course, Mote, we have a very strong relationship with Mote, and we have from the very beginning when we got started. They were our primary source of corals, our first source of corals. They really believed in our mission and in the partnership, and we still continue to jointly apply for grants and have joint deliverables that really help with our overall operations. But it was the donation from Dolores Barr Weaver that allowed us to expand in areas that we were just dreaming of. You know, it helped fund the coral, the land-based propagation program using those corals of opportunities, which was amazing. We now have a sponge restoration program, which, you know, I know everybody loves corals, but sponges are incredible little organisms too. And, you know, over the past several summers, we've had a great partnership with a PhD student, Dr. Bobby Renfro Price, now she's doctor. And, you know, where we were learning all about sponge ecology and being able to transplant sponges and grow them in a nursery. And all of this was so experimental, and she's learned so much along the way. And she's really pioneering reef-based sponge restoration work. And Dolores Barr Weaver allowed us to bring Dr. Renfro Price on as a postdoctoral fellow. So she is here with us full-time now, really launching that sponge restoration program to where we can do regular outplanting events with those sponges. And so it's such a cool new area that we're learning so much about, and still working to restore the whole community. And another area that the grant allowed us to grow was in another section of the community, which is working with younger kids. So I think we're all seeing a major decline in the number of young people getting certified to dive. And I think that a big reason for that is the expense. And so we had funding set aside to get local kids around 12 through 17, those kind of middle school, high school age kids, to get them certified to dive and to get them out on some transplant dives and put corals in their hands so they can see what's in their backyard and they can be a part of it. And so the idea is that we want to get them that exposure to keep them come, have them continue to work with us, and maybe even spark a career interest. So it's been some amazing areas of growth for us that we never really saw coming.
That's great. I'm glad to hear of your progress. And and growth. It's just exciting. I know, I wanted to ask you another question, Mike. And this is really your chance to speak to our divers directly. You were as the CNN hero and the sea hero, coral rock star, both of you are. But what message do you have for divers around the world? Because we don't know who's going to be watching this, right? Who want to join and fight to save coral reefs. What's your message to them?
That's a good question. It's a message I've been espousing for a very long time, and every chance I get the opportunity like this is a great platform for me to let everyone know that if you're a diver and you're going on a dive trip, it doesn't matter where you're going. You could be going to Honduras, you can be going to the Philippines, you can be coming to the Keys. At the very minimum, give a day back to that reef, to that community that is working to rebuild the reef. Give one day back of your trip. If you're diving for 5 days, give a day. Spend the time to learn about the organizations that are in that local community, and there will be someone, some group, some individual. Find out who they are, reach out to them and say, okay, you're a small nonprofit, my family's here for a week, I would like my family to assist you in whatever way we can for one day. So if every diver decides that they'll take up that level of responsibility, then wherever you go, you will see a difference. You will see groups like ours, groups like MOAT, groups like Reef Renewal Bonaire, Hope, Fragments of Hope in Belize, and go on and on. There are a litany of groups that would welcome that assistance in any way, shape, or form, and that's what it takes. It would change the future of so much of the work that we do.